Can I ask what you want?
No, I got the Bible.
Okay.
I need my pen and pencil.
Ow! Get off my phone.
My wife says to say hello to all of you. Maybe I got a picture of the church building. She goes, "That is the cutest little church building." Really liked it. Wait a couple minutes till it's 10.
What's that, Mike? Oh, nope, this way.
Good morning. What a lovely, beautiful morning to be together. And we're so glad that you could be here today. It's good to see everybody that's here. Thank you for the effort you have all made to be here. And we began this series last night. And for those of you that were here, and almost everyone that's here today was here last night, we got off to a great start. Brother Brent Hunter has come to be with us this weekend from Tampa, Florida, all the way up to Wallingford, Connecticut. And we're so glad to have him. The lessons that he presented last night were outstanding and helpful and right where we needed them. Whether we're married in a marriage or whether we're single, whether we are widowed, whatever our situation in life might be, we learned things last night that will be very practical and useful and helpful for each of us, but also in helping and sharing with other people as well. And we look forward to the things that we will hear today. We hope that you're ready to go. You got your running shoes on. We're going to get going right away. And we've got a lot to cover today, so I don't want to take up too much time. I haven't said anything yet because I haven't had an opportunity. I'm excited to have Brent Hunter here with us. My association with him goes back 42 years. And when I was a student of his, he was not only my college professor, but he was, first of all, he was my advisor. I don't know if he remembers that or not, because when I first started college, I thought I was wanting to go into pre-law and then law school. And I don't know that he actually specifically tried to do that, but he did a good job in discouraging me from pursuing that. He was my first college Bible teacher, and he was also a speech teacher for me as well. Don't hold that against him that I didn't take too well. He taught me a lot. I'll just leave it at that. But so glad to be able to sit at his feet again. And last night, as I was listening, it reminded me of what it was like to be in his class, because he has so much to say. I forgot, again, the humor that he intersperses in the things he says as well. But he keeps your attention. But the thing that I remember most about him, and again, last night reminded me of this, is how he challenges you. He's giving you the information, but he's challenging you to engage your mind and to think. And that's so helpful and so important for us. And so we're so glad that he's here and was able to come and to be with us. And will do a great job, no doubt about that. Everybody got the handouts that he's prepared, and I hope you're ready to go. We're going to begin this morning with a prayer. Had somebody been selected for that, Isaac? No, okay, Isaac, since I've called on him already, he will lead us in a prayer as we begin, and after the prayer, Brother Hunter will come and begin.
Let us pray. Lord, we come before you now, Father, thank you for the day you've blessed all of us with. Thank you for the opportunity we have this day to study more from your word. We ask that you be with Brother Hunter at this time, that he can present these lessons to us and that we can listen to them in a way that helps all of us to grow, to be more like you in every facet of our lives, especially in our relationships, and seeing how we can grow to be more like you every single day. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. There was a dietitian who was approached by one of her clients. And the client said, so what's the one food I need to make sure I completely stay away from and don't have anything to do with? And the dietitian thought for a minute and said, wedding cake. She had just gone through a very acrimonious divorce. And so to her, that was like the worst. And it's just so sad to me how many people have just really cynical attitudes toward marriage, something that God intended to bless us in this fallen world. A bumper sticker I saw years ago illustrated this. The bumper sticker said, if love is the wine of life, marriage is the hangover. And I thought to myself, I wonder what this fellow's wife thinks about him putting that bumper sticker on his car. Maybe he was divorced or something. I don't know, but it is certainly sad that many people come to the altar with great hopes and expectations, only finding that those hopes and expectations are soon dashed. I mentioned yesterday that I'm not interested in having just a typical average marriage and family. I hope you aren't either, because the typical average marriage and family is not doing well. And typically, people get busy about other things and they neglect the home front. They neglect the marriage. And so if you neglect your love for one another, it's like a fire. If you don't continue to tend it, it eventually goes out. It's like a plant that's flourishing, but what happens if you don't water it? Eventually, it's not going to live. It's not going to do well. So you've got to continually tend and pay attention to your marriage. Too many men, especially, I think, pursue their wives and woo them, and then they propose and they're all excited, and then they stand there at the altar, and instead of saying I do to their vows, they say to themselves, I'm done. I've got her to say yes, I've got my wife, and now I can kind of go about climbing the corporate ladder or doing whatever things I want to do. That doesn't work, folks. And a lot of times, though, people, they don't know how to keep their love and their passion alive. In the 20th century, one set of experts got together and did a bunch of surveys, and they found out that the number one most impactful song of the 20th century that people said resonated with them the most was the Righteous Brothers, You've Lost That Loving Feeling. I thought that was fascinating. So many people could relate to that song and those lyrics. You never close your eyes anymore when I kiss your lips, and there's no tenderness anymore in your fingertips. And we've lost something that's so important and special, but it's gone, and I can't get it back. That was what that song was about. And too many people find You've Lost That Loving Feeling is the theme song for their marriage and relationships. And that is a tragedy and a sad thing when that occurs. So this three-part series today is talking about how to avoid that happening in a marriage and in a family. And I think I also mentioned last night briefly that I had people come to me as a young preacher, and I didn't know for sure how to help them. Didn't do a very good job. And I wanted so much to help them have a marriage, not just that survived, but thrived. So I tried a whole bunch of different things. I decided to take this was a weakness and turn it into a strength. And I got some additional education, and I additionally wound up being a marriage and family professor, considered going full-time into being a marriage and family therapist at one point in my life. And I never did go ahead and get that particular credential. And so sometimes people have said, well, you didn't get this master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And so why should I listen to you? And I just sort of smile and I say, well, yeah, I never got that credential, but you know what? I got a PhD in results. And that's what matters. Because I have found, if you follow through this process, that probably about 80% of the couples that go through this, if they'll let me be their coach, what I'm going to be talking to you about today will not only, save their marriage from divorce, but cause them when they're done to want to go on a second honeymoon. I mean, it's just unbelievable the positive results that have come from this. And basically the only times it doesn't work is, number one, they bail before we finish. They give up. And number two, they don't have humility and a heart of forgiveness. They hold on to the hurts and the offenses that they had before they came to go through the process. But if couples can go through this and let me, prayerfully coach them through this material, the results have just been amazing and very gratifying. So that's why I'm really excited about sharing this with you. And this isn't that complicated. You don't need a degree in marriage and family therapy to understand what we're talking about and apply it. And so you can take these handouts and this material and you can sit down with other people, friends and loved ones that maybe you're thinking about throwing in the towel or having marriage problems. And you can help them just like I helped them. You can be their coach. And then you can, hopefully, after you show them how these biblical principles can help their marriage, they're not a New Testament Christian, you can sit down and share the gospel with them because you build this rapport and this trust. So I see this actually as an evangelistic tool as well. And so I appreciate having the opportunity to share these things with you all today. So this is a marriage that works for both parties. So you both can have, not the perfect marriage, that doesn't exist because it's made with two imperfect human beings, right? But you can have a marriage where you're in that top tier, the top 17% of marriages, where they both say they find the marriage highly satisfactory. And remember, as Christians, when the glory of Jesus Christ is at stake, mediocrity is not an option, right? So you want to go ahead and not just settle for just getting by. You want to make sure you have not just a good marriage, but a great marriage, and one that is triumphant and that properly gives God glory. So what is the success, or what is necessary to have a marriage that works and is truly successful? It's real simple. Both must learn to care for. By that I mean communicate carefully and find out what the needs are for your spouse. So you care for your spouse by meeting their needs, and you protect each other in practical ways. You avoid things that hurt or harm the marriage. Very, very important. All right. So where do we go about finding practical tools to do this? Well, 2 books I want to recommend to you. This says 2 million copies. This is an old picture. Actually, over 3 million copies of this book has been sold. And if you're not familiar with it, it's His Needs, Her Needs by Dr. Willard Harley. And you can buy this for $6 or $7 used off of Amazon. So I just highly recommend that you consider getting this book and adding it to your arsenal of resources to help you deflect the fiery darts of the evil one that are directly aimed at our marriage and family. Satan wants to sow doubt and division, and he wants to destroy your family. And so we need to be forearmed and aware of what we can do to have the shield to deflect those fiery darts. My mother just turned 96. She's a very wise woman. I'm so glad she's still with us. And for probably 25 years, my mom and dad, when my dad was alive, they would give this to any couple they knew that was getting married. They considered this the one best resource to help them, and that was their wedding gift to these couples, for very good reason. And then the second book, which deals with the protect idea, protecting your marriage from habits that can destroy romantic love, is not as popular, but it is just as essential. And both of these together enable you to have the formula and the basic information that you need to move forward. However, this of course is written just by a man, and this man claims to be a believer, but he doesn't really talk about God or talk about the scriptures. He was asked about this on one occasion because his material is just filled with biblical principles. And he sometimes even quotes the Bible, but he never gives the reference. And reading through this, it just aggravated me to no end. And I was writing in the margin all these different things, that clearly were from the scriptures. And he said, well, I'm a businessman, and I didn't want to turn off the non-Christian audience. Most people out there are secular, but they still want to have a good marriage. So I gave them the tools so they can have a good marriage. I used God's plan, but I didn't give him credit. Well, shame on him. So he sold a lot of books, right? Because this stuff works. But a lot of my preacher friends see some of these weaknesses in Harley's material, and they kind of throw out the whole thing. And I think that's a mistake. So what I've done is I've taken Harley's paradigm and some of these basic biblical principles, and I have put the scriptures in where they belong. And I have given God proper glory, and I have made up for a couple of major kind of flies in the ointment with his material. So if you'll just read his material with this in mind and use the little 12-page primer that I've given you today, you're golden as far as I'm concerned, as far as really helping people. One of the things that Harley does not even talk about is spiritual needs. Well, that's a major omission, right? Because the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. So obviously for a Christian couple, since marriage is a spiritual covenant, that's why I started with that last night, that's number one. So you need to overlay the fact that first and foremost, you need to be praying together and meeting each other's spiritual needs. Harley doesn't do that. But everything else he does, as far as the needs he's identified, are just right on. The other thing he doesn't do is he doesn't talk about male servant leadership. He doesn't really have a head of the house. Everything's up for negotiation, and it's all, quote, 50-50. And in any relationship, you need a tiebreaker. And obviously God's plan is that somebody provides leadership in the home. And we're going to talk more about that when we deal with successful quarreling on Sunday morning. But that's one of the weaknesses of Harley's works. And as I said, the scriptures are used but not cited. So I have, given proper affirmation for Harley's paradigm and the insights that he has. And I put it together in this 12-page handout. And it's been professionally typeset, and I think you'll find it really easy to go through and use. Maybe you've had a chance to review that before today's, Saturday seminar. If so, that's helpful. If not, we're going to be talking about that at various different places today. So, part 1 is the introduction. Part 2 is overcoming love busters. And part 3 is meeting each other's needs. So what are we going to do today in the introduction? First of all, we're going to look at the idea of the love bank and how that determines how a person feels. And you marry somebody because you feel attraction and love toward them, right? The problem is, how do you keep your love and passion alive? Well, basically, it's understanding the love bank. Secondly, we're going to talk about the romantic myth, which is very common in people's thinking, but is unscriptural and frankly just untrue. And so we're going to make sure we get rid of that romantic myth idea, which is so popularized in the Hollywood movies and in a lot of the popular songs. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about the importance of habits, because learning how to habitually do things that are pleasing to your spouse is the key, really, to not offending your spouse and to meeting each other's needs. And so we're going to discuss that in a very practical way. When my wife and I were first married, we didn't know a lot of these things. And we had some pretty rough 4 or 5 years. We haven't always been really happily married and compatible. And that was another reason why I wanted to delve into this and learn how I can do better as a husband and meeting my wife's needs and having a happy marriage and family. I mean, we never talked about divorce or anything like that, but we were certainly not in that top tier for a number of years. And so I just want you to know that I'm speaking from a place of, I needed this. And when I figured it out, my wife and I together, it made a huge difference for us personally. And that's one of the reasons why I have such passion for this material. All right, so keeping true love alive. Well, obviously we need to go back to what the Bible defines as love. I love to think about love as like white light that is refracted through a prism. And when you put white light through a prism, you come up with these 8 colors of the rainbow. It's beautiful. Well, when you take love and you put it through a prism, you wind up with these 8 characteristics that are found in 1 Corinthians 13. I don't think that's coincidence. It's this beautiful description of what love truly is in its component parts. And as I mentioned last night, it's so important. All of these things are verbs. These are things that you do. It's not just a feeling. Now, if you do these things to one another and meet each other's needs and protects one another and all that, you're going to have great passion and feeling toward them. But the focus is not to just focus on the feeling, but to focus on how you treat each other, trusting that the feelings will follow. So love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. True love never fails. And so memorizing that passage, laying it up in your heart, will help you to understand the things you need to do to keep your vows to your spouse and to have a marriage that's a reflection of true love and, of course, the love that we see Christ had for the church. Now, what is this love bank? This is fascinating. Harley is the first one I know of that has really introduced it in this very practical metaphor. And I really like the idea. The idea is that when you go out and you meet someone, you maybe first meet them and then you remember their name and you don't have any emotional attachment to that person. You don't have any feelings toward that person. That you just met them. You just barely know their name. But as you have interactions and you get to know them, and maybe you enjoy each other's company and you find you have some interest in the same things and you know some of the same people and maybe you like their sense of humor and you look forward to seeing them again. And over time, that acquaintance becomes a friend. And maybe a real good friend. And the more you have exchanges with them, the more you make deposits in their love bank in a positive way, the more you have an investment in that person and the more you begin to feel attraction toward them. That's what happens in the dating process. You first date somebody, first date, you just get to know one another, but then you say, yeah, I'd like to go out again, and then these positives attract you to the other party, and then you start looking forward to being with them. And most dates, you're out having fun and maybe, enjoying some of your favorite foods, and it's a positive experience. And you go, yeah, let's do this again. And so it builds over time until eventually it's not just an acquaintance and a friend. Now this person, this is my lover. This is someone that after a while, the love bank gets so high, you reach this threshold that you say, I'm falling for this person, or I'm falling in love. That's because you've got so many deposits in your love bank toward this person, perhaps more so than any person that you've ever known, that you're just head over heels for the person. So Positive exchanges are deposits. Negative exchanges are withdrawals. This is where you're short with the other person, or you're frustrated with the other person, or something comes up, they say something offensive. And so you got this, kind of barometer here, and you have a lot of deposits, but you can start doing things to take some of those deposits down. Think of a checking account. Maybe you put a lot of money into an account, and that's great, you got a high deposit, but if you keep on writing checks on that, eventually you're going to get to what? Zero. And when you get to zero, if you've been, making all these withdrawals and you're not making enough deposits to make up for the withdrawals, that's where you wake up one day and you say, I don't love him or her anymore. I don't have any feelings for you. Well, why is that? It's real simple. The love bank is empty. When the love bank is high, you've got romantic love. But what happens is, you get this natural instinct to please and desire to be with one another. People forget that the romantic love is very fragile. The worst mistake people make is they take it for granted. Once you get this kind of cloud nine kind of feeling, and in my case, it's like I couldn't think of my future without Gail in it. And when you enjoy someone's company and you're falling in love with them, you think of your future, that person's got to be in it. And so that's why you say, we need to get married. We need to make this permanent. And we're having such a grand time making deposits in each other's love bank and enjoying each other's company that, yes, this is going to be something I expect the rest of my life is going to be. Wow, this is going to be marital bliss. And that's what you're expecting when you're standing there at the altar, getting lost in one another's eyes. And they're just beaming. I mean, when I perform wedding ceremonies, it's like, oh, I hope they can maintain this unbelievable, love and passion and faith and commitment and joy they have in each other's hearts at the altar. Because remember, half the divorces out there occur within 2 years. You go from that to sometimes not even wanting to be in the same room with one another, not even being on speaking terms. Sometimes being very bitter and angry at the other person, sad that you ever said I do. How does that happen in such a short time? Well, it's real simple. It's the love bank. Because when the love bank is empty, what happens? You have no feeling for the other person. And if you continue to do negative things toward the other party, and you might say the love bank account is overdrawn, that's where it's not just I don't love you anymore. It's now I can't stand you anymore. Now you become bitter. And what happens if you have a bank account and you continue to write checks when the account is empty? How's the bank feel about you bouncing checks? What kind of calls do you get from them? What kind of fees do you have to pay? I mean, you may decide, well, I just need to close this account out altogether. Well, that's when a person says, I didn't marry this person for this, so I'm going to walk. I'm going to get out of this relationship. And they often think they have no choice. By the way, this is a wonderful communication tool. My wife and I, since we learned about this 30 plus years ago, we talk about this all the time. If I do this for you, I know you said this is important. Is this going to be a real big deposit in the love bank? Or is this really not that big a deal? A scale of 1 to 10. My wife says, this is really important to me. It'd be like 6 or 7 deposits. Really? Okay, well, let's make this happen because I need all the deposits I can get. Or if I wake up in the morning and I'll say, honey, what can I do to make a big deposit in your love bank today? And I better be careful when I ask her that because she's always quick with responses. And usually it has to do with helping her with some of her household chores because her love language is service. Mine is more touch. Come over and sit next to me, right? Let's spend some quality time together out to dinner. What really helps her feel that I love her is when I help her with the laundry, when I help her make the bed. I don't get that. I'm not wired that way, but she is. And so if I love her, then what's important to her becomes important to me. I don't argue with her about it. I just accept that's kind of how she loves. And so why is she always vacuuming? Why does she keep such a meticulous house? Because that's one of the ways she says, I love you. So it doesn't matter that much to me. I mean, I appreciate it to a certain degree, but now I walk in and I go, well, Gail's been feathering her nest and showing her love for me and the family today, because I've learned to understand that's the way she's wired. But the point is, this is such a great communication tool. You know, honey, I know you'd rather I not be gone on this trip, but you know, it's important to me. Can I go on this trip and it not be at least a major withdrawal? She goes, yeah, just a couple of points, you'll be okay. Okay, good. I mean, it's just a fun way to kind of help assess what's going on in your relationship, is to always be aware of and talk about the love bank. And this is why I recommend couples put this on their refrigerator. And I gave you a separate sheet here from the primer so that you can look at this and just analyze what are the deposits, what are the withdrawals, and just keep in mind that that's what a happy marriage is all about, limiting the withdrawals and making as many deposits as possible. And if you're successful in doing that, at the end of every year, your love is greater for your spouse than it was the year before. Like the song says, I love you more today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but that's possible. And that's what has been happening in my marriage for years. I can't imagine my life without Gail. And, you know, we used to be not that close. And now it's just wonderful. And that's what I want for all of you. Great communication tool. So there's that Love Bank summary page. And the key to a successful marriage, as I said, is to be determined to make as many deposits as you can every day, and to then avoid withdrawals. And that's what this day is all about, talking about the different deposits and then talking about the withdrawals. You avoid the withdrawals and make the deposits, and you'll have a happy marriage. Now, let's talk about the romantic myth. That is what so many people believe, and they've never really challenged it. And it's one of the reasons why so many people are so quick to bail on their marriage when things are not going well and try to find happiness somewhere else. It's just so sad. People rarely give up on love or marriage. They just think if things aren't going well, oh, I married the wrong person. They give up on the person that they're supposed to love and that they made these commitments to, and maybe the mother of their children or the father of their children. They're so quick to bail on the person. Stay committed to the person and then figure out how to make things better. If you've got a bank account, you've got all these, fees and all these with, checks that have bounced, you don't have to close the account. You can stop writing checks and make a bunch of deposits, and you can rescue that account so it's in good condition again. That's also true with the love bank in your relationship. But people think that once you have it, you can never lose it. I mean, people, especially in the West, they marry because they want a soulmate. They marry for love, and I did too. Good for you. I married for love as well. And they think it's so strong when this love bank is way up here and they've met this threshold that we have something so special and so unique that we don't have to worry about this. It's you and me, babe, against the world, and we've got this. There's this unbelievable kind of naive confidence when you get to that point. And you think that you can keep that without investing in it or paying much attention to it, which is not true. As I said, romantic love can be very fragile. It's like a fire. If you don't continue to tend to it, it eventually will go out. But people have this idea that once you hit that threshold, once you have it, you can never lose it. And then once it's lost, they think it can never be regained. It's just over. Or maybe, well, this is evidence. I think there's only one soulmate for me in the whole world. 8 billion people out there, and there's only one person that fate would have me to be with. And I guess I married the wrong one. So, it's such a dumb concept. There's 8 billion people and there's only one person out there that was meant for you. That is just not so. It is a wrong-headed notion. There's a lot of people you could learn to be happy with. if you follow the principles. It's who you choose, not trying to find one person out of 8 billion that is the right one. And no, if things aren't going well, it's because the love bank has not been paid attention to. Not because, oh my, I married the wrong person. One of the things that helped Gail and I when we were having struggles was we really prayed, is this God's will? Is this God's will? And we were convinced that it was. And so we never doubted that. We're having trouble here. We need to fix this. But we're not going to ever doubt each other. And we're not going to give up on each other. But people think once the romantic love is gone and they wake up one morning and they say, I don't have any feelings for you anymore, I don't love you, they think the love can never be regained, and that is just not true. Romance can be reborn. I have seen it over and over again, and it is really simple. You stop making withdrawals and you start making deposits. Couples usually come to me for counseling because, they're in deep trouble. And the thing that frustrates me the most is most of the time couples wait too late to get help. Sometimes they've already been talking divorce and things like that. I mean, they've done so much damage and have been unhappy for a long time till finally they see a counselor. Please, if you have a major issue in your marriage that hasn't been resolved in 2 weeks, go and get help early. You do that with your physical health. If you've got a cough that won't go away, or you've got some headache that won't go away, you don't just live with it. You go to the doctor and say, hey, something's wrong here, I need help. And then hopefully you get some medication, you find out what the issue is, and you get help. You do that for your physical body, do it for your relationships, please. But anyway, what will typically happen is you can see the couples like this, and they talk about him and her as if they're not present. That's always a real bad danger signal. Well, he does this and he does that, and I go, this person is right here. Can you call them by name and maybe look them in the eye when you talk about them? But see, there's these barriers that have gone up, right? And the woman, you can usually tell by looking in her eyes. The eyes are the windows of the soul, and you can just see they're kind of sullen, and they walk in, they're kind of hopeless, and they're discouraged, and they've got negative balances in their love accounts. And what my job is in the first session is to try to give them a way out, to try to give them a paradigm that can give them hope. You don't have to stay in this. To tell somebody you're miserable and you're unhappily married, but you made a vow, so stick with it, too bad, too sad, that's not helpful. Who wants to stay in a relationship long term where you're going to be miserable? I understand why people often, say, no, I'm not going to do that. And we need to have compassion toward people that are in an unhappy marriage. I mean, you start off walking down the beach, holding hands, enjoying the scenery, just loving being in each other's company. And then over the years, things happen and things are said and hurts are given and held by the other person, and you begin to feel bitter. And now, instead of walking down the beach holding hands, you feel like you're handcuffed to this person. You don't really want to be with them anymore, and you don't love them anymore. You don't feel accepted in their presence because you're stuck. You feel trapped. Do you understand how hard that is? Somebody who's never been in a relationship that has gone sour, I understand, man, that's tough. So my job, our job, is to give people hope and to give them practical solutions and to give them ways by which you can turn this around. There is hope. Jesus said, all things are possible to them that believe. And of course, Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's not a verse you should quote before a football game. I don't think the Lord is particularly concerned about who wins a football game. But he's concerned about your marriage. And you can find strength within you to be a better husband or wife and to keep your vows. That's where I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me certainly applies. Let me tell you something else I think is really impactful if you're dealing with two Christians. frequently they'll say, our love is dead. We have no feelings for one another anymore. What do we do? And I'll say, do you believe that, you're going to die one day and you're going to be buried somewhere, and that in the second coming, the Lord's going to return and he's going to have this general resurrection of the righteous and the unrighteous, and that you're going to come forth from that tomb and you're going to be transfigured, and you're going to be transfigured and transformed one day all the way up into heaven? Do you believe that that's your future if you're a disciple? Well, yeah, that's the foundation of our faith. So you believe that Jesus came forth from the tomb? Yes, I do. And I want you to think about this. I've got good news for you. You and I serve a God who specializes in the resurrection from the dead. Right? And if you believe that God can take a dead body and bring it forth and make it come alive again through his power, don't you believe that he can take your love that has grown cold and perhaps is dead and bring it forth to his glory as well? Of course. If God can resurrect your body one day, he can certainly resurrect your love. If you will just let him, and if you will be humble, and you'll let me coach you through these biblical principles, so you can be ready when we're done to go on a second honeymoon. Don't think it can't happen to you. It can. I've seen it happen over and over again to couples that are a lot worse shape than you are. And it's so interesting how you can just see it, especially in the woman's eyes. All of a sudden, she's got a little sparkle that comes back. It's hope. Hope is so important. You can't go for more than a couple of months without food from your body. You can't go for more than 72 hours without some sort of liquid, or you begin to become dehydrated. You're not going to make it. And you can only go for about 5 minutes without oxygen, or you begin to suffer irreparable brain damage. But how long can a person live without hope? When a person loses all hope, it's like something very important within them shrivels up and dies. You can't live without hope. And what a lot of couplers are going through is they've tried over and over again to try to fix it on their own, and they're not successful, and they lose hope. And you and I need to tell them, there is hope. And I want to tell you how you can walk through this process and turn this around to God's glory. Then they come back for the second session with a completely different mindset. And it's just so wonderful to see the marriage begin to turn around. And that's what today's about. I'm showing you what I've done over the last several decades to walk couples through this, because our God specializes in the resurrection of the dead. Now keep in mind, there are two sides to marital conflict. Couples fail to make each other happy, which basically is a failure to care, failure to make deposits. You just get busy with your job, or a woman may be busy with the kids. Sometimes wives are too much mothers and not enough wives. You got to keep your focus on each other. The kids are going to grow up and be gone one day, and then you're back to just the two of you. Don't neglect your marriage. Model before the kids what love is all about. But sometimes we get just too busy. Failure to make each other happy, failure to care. Or couples make each other unhappy. Failure to protect your spouse from harm or from hurt. And they wind up making withdrawals. And so what we need to do is figure out, what can we do to effectively turn that around? Listen carefully to this. Who am I? I am your constant companion. I am your greatest helper or heaviest burden. I will push you onward or drag you down to failure. I am completely at your command. Half the things you do, you might just as well turn over to me, and I will be able to do them quickly and correctly. I am easily managed. You must merely be firm with me. Show me exactly how you want something done, and after a few lessons, I will do it automatically. I am the servant of all great individuals, and alas, of all failures as well. Those who are great, I've made great. Those who are failures, I've made failures. I am not a machine, though I work with all the precision of a machine plus the intelligence of a human. You may run me for profit or run me for ruin. It makes no difference to me. Take me, train me, be firm with me, and I will place the world at your feet. Be easy with me, and I will destroy you. Who am I? I am habit. So many times people say, well, that's just the way I am. Well, doesn't mean you have to stay that way. A habit is a cable, and we weave a thread of it every day, and it lasts over time. It can't be broken, or at least is very difficult to break. In reality, it only takes about 8 weeks to form a new habit. That's amazing. It takes a lot of conscious discipline to change your habits, but it can be done. And this idea of habit is a very important biblical concept. The Bible says in 1 Timothy 4 and verse 11 that we're to exercise or discipline ourselves unto godliness. And this idea of changing our habits has to do with this discipline. Proverbs 16:3, commit your works unto Jehovah, and thy purposes will be established. Some translations say your habits will be established. So that's right. God, what is your will for my life? What can we do as a couple to really glorify you and make a difference? And I like Proverbs 4 and verse 26, makes level the paths of thy feet, and all thy ways will be established. Same idea. Your habits will be determined by these choices you make as a disciple. So, what is the key? Well, you communicate clearly without defensiveness what your needs are and what sometimes happens to hurt your feelings. My wife is really good at reality checks. I mean, sometimes she'll say, I think you messed up here. Okay, how do you think I messed up? She'll talk to me about something I need to hear. And that can be kind of hard at times. But I want to have an authentic relationship. I want her to be able to express how she really feels. So when she says she loves me or she's proud of me or she gives me a compliment, I know she's just not saying things as a flatterer. But it means something because it's real. You need to communicate clearly without defensiveness and really listen and determine to develop the kind of habits you need to avoid harming your spouse or to make sure that you can meet their needs. Focus on the love bank and your spouse's needs instead of just reacting. And that, my friends, is basically the key to a happy marriage. Learn to habitually meet each other's needs and to avoid hurting your spouse's feelings. Now, what's the process behind this? Well, there are 4 stages. I find this really fascinating because a lot of people find, as I did, that there were some ways when Gail and I first were married where, well, I'll just use me as an example. We were unconsciously incompetent. What do you mean unconsciously incompetent? Well, you don't wake up one morning and say, well, I'm going to make a big withdrawal from the love bank today. I'm going to, hurt my wife's feelings today. Typically, that's not at all what's going on. That's not your intent. But the point is, you do something that she finds annoying, or you do something that she finds offensive. And it wasn't intentional, but that was the end result. And so, oftentimes, we are unconsciously incompetent. I'm busy trying to make a living and focusing on my career. Yes, that's important, and I'm making money for my family, but am I also neglecting some of my family's needs because I'm a workaholic? See? Unconsciously incompetent. So then you go through these rating forms that I've given you, and you start having deep communication, and all of a sudden you realize, I shouldn't be doing this. That talking to her in that manner or in that way, that really causes this wall to go up. So what typically happens is then you become consciously incompetent. What do I mean by that? Well, habits are hard to change. And just because somebody tells you one day, I don't want you to say that anymore, doesn't mean if you've been saying it all your life that suddenly you're going to be 100% perfect and not continuing in that on occasion. So you need to be patient with each other. But what happens is when you say those words, now it's like, oh yeah, my wife doesn't like me saying that. That hurts her feelings. So now at least you have pangs of conscience, and maybe you'll say, hey, I'm sorry, I messed up. So it takes a while to get to the point where you become consciously confident. You catch yourself now before you get to that point, and you don't say that anymore. But you have to work at it. And again, it takes at least 8 weeks to begin to make significant progress. And then after a while, what happens? Now you're unconsciously confident. It's a new habit. You just do this without thinking. Let me give you a real example of one of the first things that my wife and I had a quarrel about after we'd only been married, literally only a few weeks. My wife came from a family where you didn't dog-ear the pages of the magazine or book. You would use the book. So I'm not going to ask you all what kind of family you came from, but in my family it was no big deal. You just dog-eared the pages of the book, and that's how you found out where you left off. So that's why I was raised. It's no big deal. So she comes to me. We haven't been married very long. And she had these magazines that came to the house, and I was looking at them. And she goes, what have you done to my magazines? You've ruined my magazines. I go, I'm not ruining your magazines. What are you talking about? Why would I ruin your magazines? She goes, well, look. She showed me these dog-eared pages in the magazine. I'd say, so? And she'd go, no. Don't you know, it's just uncouth to do that. Use a little bookmarker instead. I go, really? Does that really matter? You know, and she goes, yeah, it matters to me. I go, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know that was such a big deal. So what did I do? I continued to dog-ear the pages of the magazine. Not because I intended to and I wanted to bother her, but it was subconscious. It was just something I did without realizing it. I'm sitting there looking at this magazine. She calls me to dinner, and I go, sure. And so I just dog-ear the page, and I go, whoa. Then I begin to catch myself. See, that's where you're consciously incompetent. I've already done the damage. I'm in the doghouse. And she was really having a hard time. Here you go again. I said, you look at these books, and please don't do that. She'd give me bookmarks again. It took me a while to change that lifelong habit. Eventually I did. I became consciously confident, and now I tell you, I would never even think of doing that. Somebody says marriage is two becoming one, and the whole time you're trying to figure out which one. A lot of truth in that. So the point is, I had a habit that bothered her, and I needed to love her enough to change that habit at her request, but it took time and she needed to be patient. Now that's maybe a silly example, but that's for real what goes on when you're trying to become more compatible for each other. You got that? And by the way, that's not just in marriage, that's in a co-worker relationship, roommate relationship. I mean, this applies to all these different relationships. And my recommendation is, don't argue about it. If it bothers the other person, it's much easier for you to change your habit than it is for this person to somehow or other not be bothered. See what I'm saying? Very, very important concept. These are just practical applications of love. Husbands, love your wives even as Christ loved the church. How did he love the church? He sacrificed for us. And sometimes he suffered for us. And wives are also to love their husbands, right? And to submit themselves unto their husbands even as they do unto the Lord. So how does that work in a practical way? I think Harley's paradigm is perfect. We're supposed to honor one another. Husbands, honor your wives. Put them up on a pedestal. One of the ways I honor Gail is I do not dog-ear pages of books because she doesn't like it. And wives are to honor and respect their husbands. There's certain things she does for me simply because I really like that. Stop vacuuming, please, and sit over here on the couch with me and let's snuggle. Now, that's really what a lot of women want, but in that way, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like a woman. I like that affection. I do. Nothing wrong with that. More than my wife does. Because we're kind of wired differently. But you know, she will say, thanks for letting me know. I get kind of wrapped up in this sometimes. And so we just kind of smile and understand what we need to do to both meet each other's needs. What's the key to a happy marriage? You have to learn to care for the other person, meet their needs, and avoid hurting them, protect them. In fact, when someone else is saying things that's rude or hurtful to my spouse, I immediately rush out to protect her. And when I do that, Gail says she feels so loved because she wants me to be her protector. And I think that's a part of manliness. I really do. I think God put this sense of masculinity in us in a positive way to protect women and children. And how sad it is that sometimes we men are saying, doing hurtful things. She wants us to be her protector, and then we're the one that's hurting her feelings and causing her to put up a wall. Listen, the biggest thing that is your enemy in your marriage relationship is allowing walls to grow up between the two of you. That's your enemy. You know what the essence of passion is? It's being able to share your heartfelt emotions openly without any barriers or fear that those feelings are going to be used against you in the future in an argument or worse, laughed at. You need to be able to be yourself with your spouse without walls. And that's when passion comes into play. So many times people think about sex and they think about technique and all that. Most of the time, if you can just keep the walls down and keep the trust up, life in the bedroom will be fine because you don't have walls between the two. The sexual relationship is usually just a symptom of the relationship as a whole. And you have to understand these principles. We don't teach this in schools. And if you haven't picked this up at home from a functional family, you're not going to know this. I came from a pretty functional family, but most of this I didn't know. And it was just like this. And it's not that hard. And so there's hope for any marriage if they'll just understand these principles and find what they need to do to have a marriage that works. Amen? Okay, now, can you begin to see yourself as somebody who gets this well enough that you can take this primer and help somebody else that's lost hope or considering throwing in the towel? I want you to see yourself as equipped for being here today. Not just for yourself, but for others. And wouldn't that be great if we could kind of decrease the divorce rate and obliterate the failure rate? People who are staying together but unhappy. So we're going to take about a 7-minute break and then we'll come back to part 2. You guys are listening really well. Thank you. That's deposits in my love bank. Keep it up. All right, so get up, move around so we can be ready for part 2. Thank you.